In this video, we will look at creating dashboard reports. But before we jump in, let's first look at the overall process that needs to be followed. Dashboard reports are the individual reports displayed on a dashboard. The dashboard itself is where we display the collection of reports. In my example, I can see my dashboard and the individual reports, also known as dashlets. We will focus on creating these reports. The creation of the dashboard itself is handled in a separate video. There are two steps needed to create the report. First, you need to create the report, and second, add this report to your dashboard. Before continuing, it's important to understand that you will need to be versed in writing SQL syntax to create reports. SQL stands for Structured Query Language and is a language used to communicate with a database. Reports require a SQL query to retrieve data, and this needs to be provided by either you or another technical person in your team. To start, we first need to access the dashboard configuration area. You can do this via the maintenance application. Click on the report drop-down and then choose Dashboard Configuration. The dashboard configuration window will then appear. This window is split into two parts. First, we have the Dashboard Designer, which allows us to create, edit, and delete dashboards. The second is the Report Designer, and this is where we will focus for now. It is here that we create our reports. Also take note that on both areas we have provided links to video tutorials which will explain each part in detail. The Report Designer page is divided into two parts. At the top we have buttons where we can create new reports, edit existing reports, and delete reports if we so wish. We then have a list of the created reports shown here with their respective details. First, we can see the type of report, the name, and a short description. You have a handy filter where you can filter the report. Simply click in the field and enter the report name. So let's create our own report. To do so, click on the New Report button. And this will bring up the New Report wizard, which will guide you through all the steps needed to create your report. The first step is to define the report components. We need to provide a report name in the name field. Next, add in a short description for this report and then choose the report type from the options shown here. I will choose pie chart for now. Once you are happy with your selection, click on the Next button. The next step is to add in your SQL query. This can be added by typing it out or pasting in an SQL query into the white block. The query I just pasted is very simple and returns a count of records per country for a specific case type. This query defines which columns are to be returned as well as the criteria we are searching on. Click Next again to move to the component configuration. On this page, you set the data labels as defined by the report type chosen. Because I chose a pie chart, I need to provide two data series labels. If I choose a different report type, these values would change. Let's demonstrate this. I will choose a different report type. To move backward in the wizard, click on the Back button. Let's select a line chart and then click the Next button until we see the component configuration screen again. Notice that the fields listed has now changed to meet the newly selected chart type requirement. I will change this back to a pie chart for now. We now need to allocate values to these data series label. To do so, simply click on the drop-down and choose the value from the list. These values that we see here, where do they come from? These values are the columns that are returned as defined in your SQL query. If I click the Back button, I can see we have two columns defined, case count and country. I will now add in my data labels as needed. Click Finish to finalize your report. We have now successfully created our first report. The next step is to add it to the dashboard. Click on the Dashboard Designer link. We won't delve into too much detail here as this is discussed in a separate video, but we will briefly look at it. First, select the dashboard you wish to add the report to and click Edit Dashboard. Move to the second page of the wizard by clicking the Next button. Now select the report you just created and drag it into the layout area. My report will now be displayed with dummy data to illustrate how it will look when run. Click Next and Finish to finalize the report. So let's take a look at how this looks in Patricia. I will click on My Dashboard and my report appears. There is one more important point to mention. We have the concept of criteria in dashboard reports, where a user can enter a value into that report that affects the results. An example of this can be seen on screen. This input we require from the user needs to be defined in SQL, and it needs to be in a specific format. So there are two steps to add user-required criteria. The first is to define it in the SQL query itself by using a specific format. And then second is to set up this parameter in the Dashboard Designer area. So what is the format we need to adhere to? To mark a value as a placeholder which the user needs to enter, we need to write out this placeholder as follows. So let's create a new report which has a parameter. Click on the new report and enter the necessary details. Click Next to move to the SQL configuration page. I will paste in my SQL query. Here I have the same SQL query, but I wish the user to enter a start date and an end date as criteria. I can see the date criteria shown here, but this will not work as we need to set this as a placeholder using the specific format. So let's change this to the correct format. I will choose Next and set up my data series fields like before. Let's finalize the report. I now once again need to add this report to a dashboard, so I will choose my dashboard and click Edit. I will click and drag my report to the layout area and then move on to the parameter configuration screen. Notice that when I've added my report to the dashboard, I can now see the parameters I created earlier, and it is here that we configure these parameters. Next, we need to define the component type. We have three component types available. We have date type, we have text type, and a combo box which allows the user to make a selection from a drop-down. Whenever you use a combo box option, you need to specify the SQL syntax that will be used to populate your drop-down list. Do this by clicking on the button here and adding your SQL query. As an example, if I had a report that required the user to enter a login ID, I would need to create the placeholder, edit the parameters area, and then add the SQL syntax to my parameter to populate the drop-down list with these login IDs. Remember to also choose the value and label field shown here. So I will choose date components for both of these values because they are dates. I will also add in the label that will appear next to the component on the report. We also need to set the default value that will be entered when we run the report. Do this by clicking here and making your selection. The last step is to set security. Click on the security button to do this. Note that this is on parameter level and not report level. If a user is omitted from parameter security setting, they will not be able to enter value on the parameter. Let's take a look in Patricia at my newly created report. Note that I now have my components on display, which allows me to enter values which will populate the SQL placeholders. Let's go back to Report Designer. So to edit an existing report, first select the line entry and then click Edit. To delete a report, do the same but click the Delete button. Do keep in mind that if a report is part of a dashboard, you will not be able to delete it. The report needs to be removed from that dashboard before you can delete it. So to end, that is the process to create dashboard reports. This video is part of a series of videos, so be sure to watch all the training videos available.